In February 1979, China invaded Vietnam to teach it a lesson, and 3 weeks later its army limped home in bloody defeat, mauled by border militia while Vietnam's best troops were not even in the country. That was not an anomaly. It was a 1,000-year pattern repeating. And the real question is not whether Vietnam is more dangerous than China admits, but whether anyone has ever truly held it. Before dawn on February 17, 1979, artillery thundered across the border as Chinese columns surged into northern Vietnam. The official line from Beijing was clear. This was punishment, a short, sharp lesson for Hanoi's defiance in Cambodia. But the fighting that followed in Lang Son, Chao Bang, and Lao Cai quickly turned that promise into a costly ordeal. Over 200,000 Chinese troops, backed by tanks and armored vehicles, pushed through mountain passes and battered their way into border towns. The terrain, broken and forested, denied easy movement. Roads vanished into mud and rock. Vietnamese defenders, regulars, local militia, even farmers pressed into service, used every ridge and ravine for ambushes. Minefields and booby traps slowed the advance. Tunnels and hidden bunkers let small groups strike, then melt away. The PLA, built for massed movement, found itself cut up and outflanked. Supply trucks bogged down. Commanders struggled with broken communications. By late February, Chinese forces had seized battered provincial centers, but every kilometer came at a price. Estimates of Chinese casualties range from 20,000 to over 60,000, a figure Beijing never confirmed. Vietnamese losses were heavy too, but the defenders had made entry so expensive that occupation was out of the question. After just 3 weeks, Chinese units began to pull back, leaving smoking ruins and a message that echoed hollow. The border returned to its old lines. No decisive political outcome, no lasting shift in power. What remains is the puzzle. How could a smaller, less equipped country force such a steep toll on a far larger invader, especially when Vietnam's main army was still fighting hundreds of miles away? That question, unanswered in 1979, haunts every calculation about Vietnam's true danger, even now. Vietnam has spent 1,000 years refining the art of resistance. Century after century, foreign armies have marched in with overwhelming numbers and modern weapons, only to find themselves tangled in a landscape and a mindset that will not yield. The pattern began under the shadow of imperial China. For nearly a millennium, Chinese dynasties claimed the Red River Delta as their southern frontier. Each time, as soon as the grip tightened, Vietnamese uprisings forced a retreat. In 938, General Ngo Quyen turned the tides, literally, by luring a Chinese fleet into the Bac Dang River, where hidden stakes and the rising water destroyed the invaders and ended 1,000 years of direct Chinese rule. The Mongol Empire, at its height the most feared force on Earth, tried 3 times to subdue Vietnam in the 13th century. Each invasion unraveled in the same way. Supply lines snapped, disease swept the camps, and river traps shattered fleets at Bac Dang. Tran Hung Dao's defense in 1288 stands as a warning carved in national memory. No matter how many banners cross the border, the land itself favors those who know it best. Colonial France, convinced that firepower and discipline would conquer jungle and rice paddy, built a fortress at Dien Bien Phu in 1954. But French paratroopers found themselves encircled by Viet Minh artillery, hauled through the hills by hand. Their air supply cut, their positions overrun after 56 days. The surrender forced Paris to abandon Indochina altogether. America arrived with helicopters and napalm, determined to win where others had failed. Yet the war dragged on for years, draining will and treasure. Hanoi endured bombing campaigns and ground assaults, relying on tunnels, local militia, and a network of hidden supply routes. In the end, the United States withdrew, unable to impose a lasting order. What ties these defeats together is not just geography or clever tactics, but a national habit. Every occupation becomes a war of attrition. Every victory for the invader turns into a slow bleed. For any power, holding Vietnam is a test of endurance few can pass. And as the story moves from jungle valleys to contested waters, the same lesson waits offshore. Out past the surf, a low growl cuts the morning haze. Vietnamese Su-30 fighters sweep the coastline, their silhouettes sharp against the pale sky. Each one carries anti-ship missiles and the ability to strike targets far out at sea. Below, the water hides something quieter and more unsettling. 6 Kilo-class submarines, built for stealth, gliding beneath the waves. These are not showpieces for a parade. They are hunters, designed to vanish and reappear where least expected, forcing any approaching fleet to wonder what waits below the surface. On shore, bastion coastal defense batteries sit tucked behind ridgelines and tangled brush. Each launcher is capable of sending a supersonic missile over 300 kilometers, enough to reach deep into the shipping lanes or punish ships that stray too close. The message is clear: the closer an enemy comes, the higher the price becomes. These systems do not promise naval supremacy. They are not meant to meet an adversary ship for ship. Instead, they are built to make every kilometer of water leading to Vietnam's beaches a risk, one that grows with every mile traveled. Vietnam's armed forces have learned from centuries of invasion that the best defense is to make the cost of entry unbearable. Today's arsenal is a modern extension of that old lesson. The Su-30s, the submarines, and the bastion batteries are not just weapons. They are warning signs. The sea itself becomes a contested ground long before a single soldier sets foot on shore. And as new flashpoints ignite in the South China Sea, the question is no longer whether Vietnam can hold its ground, but how far its reach can extend into the contested blue. Vietnam's defense is not built for dramatic victories or swift, decisive battles. It is built to deny an occupier the very thing they seek: control. The doctrine that guides this approach is older than any missile or jet. It is a philosophy that treats every village, every mountain path, every inlet as a potential battlefield, not for open confrontation, but for slow, grinding resistance. The logic is simple. Make every step costly, every supply line fragile, every day a test of patience and morale. At its core, this is a people's war. Command is decentralized, with authority pushed down to local militias and regional leaders who know the land and its hiding places. Regular army units act as the backbone, but the real strength lies in thousands of small groups who can vanish and reappear, striking where least expected. The terrain itself becomes an ally. Dense forests, twisting rivers, and narrow passes break up enemy formations, isolate columns, and turn speed into a liability. No invader can ever be sure what waits around the next bend. The doctrine does not promise to stop an enemy at the border. Instead, it prepares the country to absorb the blow, then bleed the occupier over weeks, months, or years. The goal is not victory in the conventional sense, but exhaustion, forcing the invader to spend resources, time, and lives for every kilometer gained. History shows that even when superior forces seize ground, holding it becomes a war without end, a campaign fought in shadows and memory as much as on maps. This is the logic that links ancient river traps to modern missile belts. The lesson is clear. In Vietnam, the question is never how to get in. It is whether you can ever leave on your own terms. Tension gathers where the continent falls away into the South China Sea. Here, the old calculus of mountain warfare is replaced by a chessboard of reefs, sandbars, and shifting lines drawn on water. China's 9-dash line, first traced on a map in 1947, sweeps deep into waters claimed by Vietnam, cutting across fishing grounds, oil blocks, and the very heart of Hanoi's security. The Paracel Islands, seized by Chinese forces in a brief but decisive clash in 1974, remain a scar in Vietnamese memory and a warning for the future. Each anniversary brings fresh protests, but the facts on the water are harder to erase. Further south, the Spratly Islands bristle with outposts, radar domes, and supply depots, each side pouring concrete and resolve onto contested reefs. But the real battle plays out in daily encounters. Vietnamese and Chinese Coast Guard ships are circling, ramming and flashing water cannons, each maneuver a test of nerve and claim. No single incident tips the balance, but each one makes the sea itself more dangerous. In this arena, sovereignty is not just a matter of law or history, it is measured in proximity, persistence, and the willingness to risk a collision. The next crisis will not start with armies crossing a border, but with a standoff at sea, where the cost of miscalculation rises with every wave. A modern war between China and Vietnam would not begin with a dramatic charge or end with a single, decisive clash. China holds the advantage in raw numbers. More ships, more planes, more missiles. If fighting erupted, the opening hours would likely see Chinese forces pressing hard at sea, using their overwhelming fleet to try to break through Vietnam's outer defenses. But Vietnam's answer is not to meet force with force. Instead, every mile closer to shore becomes a test. Submarines slip beneath the waves, coastal missile batteries wait in silence, and fighter jets circle above, ready to strike at exposed ships. Each system is designed less to win a quick victory than to deny China any easy follow-through. Even if the first exchange favors the larger power, the harder problem comes next. Holding ground, resupplying distant outposts, and keeping ships safe from constant ambush are the challenges that have tripped up every invader before. The cost grows with every attempt to turn a battlefield win into lasting control. In Vietnam, the difference between seizing a reef and securing the future is measured in weeks, months, and years of resistance. The question is never just who wins the first battle, but who can afford to keep fighting when the price keeps rising. Power can redraw maps, but endurance decides who holds them. In the shadow of rising fleets and shifting alliances, Vietnam's true threat is the cost it imposes on overconfidence. In every contested water, history still sharpens the edge. Tell us, does legacy still outmatch might? Subscribe for more untold conflicts.